This PowerPoint presentation is called The Birth of the Bronx. We're going to talk about the Bronx in the old days, in the colonial times, when it wasn't even called the Bronx. By the 17th century, the quest for the Northwest Passage was a prime preoccupation of the commercial seafaring nations of Western Europe. The Netherlands was a major commercial sea power at the time. In 1609, the Dutch East India Company, whose major focus was the East India spice trade, hired an Englishman named Henry Hudson to sail eastward across the Arctic Ocean to reach Asia. Hudson, captain of the Half Moon, convinced his mixed Dutch and English crew of 18 or 20 men to try to find the Northwest Passage instead. On September 2nd, 1609, while sailing northward along the coast of North America, the ship entered New York Bay and later the estuary that would later be called Hutchinson River. Since the waterway was wide, deep, and salty, both captain and crew believed that they may have discovered the Northwest Passage. When the ship got to the area near Albany, the water became fresh. This was a disappointment. Well, on the night of October 2nd, 1609, Hudson steered the Half Moon into Spike and Dagger Creek. A storm was brewing, and the narrow and shallow waterway flanked by high hills seemed a good place for shelter. Spotting Marble Hill, Robert Jewett, Hudson's second mate, described it as a color of white-green, as though it was either a copper or silver mine. The wind and rain battered the small ship that night, and the day followed. At one point, it went around in the oozy soil, but it was able to float again. The storm continued to blow through the night of October 3rd. When fair weather returned on October 4th, Hudson sailed in his ship back onto the majestic river that bears his name and returned to Europe. This is a brand new painting of Adrian Block. With the fur trade growing rapidly and chaotic, the States General, the governing body of the Netherlands, announced in 1614 that it would issue a charter to any group allowing it to make 4 voyages into the New World if it discovered new territories and reported its findings. 13 merchants sent 5 vessels to do the job. Block set sail for Manhattan, but his ship accidentally caught fire and was almost completely burned. His crew then built another ship on Manhattan Island, naming it the Onrust, or Restless in English. With this new vessel, Block proceeded up the East River, found the swirling, treacherous waters that he named Hell Gate, explored the Harlem River, thus determining that Manhattan was not part of the mainland, and mapped the islands along the eastern shore of the Bronx. On the basis of Block's discoveries and those of the other captains who have gone elsewhere, the partners who financed the venture received the charter to enjoy exclusive trade in the area for the first time, named New Netherland. The charter for the New Netherland Company, however, was to expire in 1618. In the time allotted, the company traded up the Hudson River, but it is not known if they did so in the Bronx. Another guy that was connoitering around this part of in this time frame, he was an Englishman, and his name was Thomas Dermer, and he explored Long Island Sound, hugging the western shoreline. He passed through Throgs Neck, and there natives spotted his vessel and shot arrows at it. This is an indication that the residents of that area might have had previous contacts with Europeans that were not considered positive. Dermer proceeded through Hell Gate, where he lost an anchor, but his ship otherwise emerged unharmed. By 1625, the Dutch West India Company had fully established the colony of New Netherland and the settlement of New Amsterdam, located at the southern tip of Manhattan. Can't really see it there. This is an east and west perception here. This is Manhattan Island. This is the Bronx here. This is the Harlem River, the North River, and this would be the heart of the Hudson River, rather, and this is the Harlem River. However, for its untamed wilderness and the ongoing threats from the natives in the area, finding merchants willing to trade in such conditions proved to be a very big problem for the Dutch. They usually resulted in hiring individuals who were from different backgrounds. One of my favorite examples of this was a person named Juan Rodriguez. Born in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, son of a Portuguese sailor and an African woman, Rodriguez arrived in New Amsterdam in 1613. He soon came to learn the Algonquin language of the Lenape people and married into the local community. When his crew of merchants returned to the Netherlands, Rodriguez stayed behind with his Native American family and he set up his own trading post with goods given to him by his superiors. Rodriguez is considered the first non-native resident of what would eventually become New York City, predating the Dutch settlers. He is also considered the first immigrant, the first person of African heritage, the first person of European heritage, the first merchant, the first Latino, and the first Dominican to settle in Manhattan. But these people that I mentioned, they weren't the only explorers. They weren't the only people that were looking at the Bronx, for some type of opportunity. In June 1641, the Dutch authorities allowed the English, some English, to settle in what is now the Eastern Bronx, provided that they were led by their clergymen and swore allegiance to the States General and the company, used Dutch weights and measures, and did not erect fortifications. In return, the English were guaranteed free exercise of their religion, the right to trade according to company regulations, to nominate their own magistrates, and to hold land and free of taxes for 10 years. Now, what you're looking at here is present-day Soundview, Classen Point, and Throck's Neck. According to these conditions, John Throckmorton and 35 families requested permission to settle on the mainland of New Netherland, which was granted on October 2nd, 1642. Throckmorton, an English Puritan, had migrated to Massachusetts, but later became a follower of the more religiously tolerant Roger Williams. He followed Williams to Rhode Island when he was expelled from Massachusetts. The Puritan leaders of the Bay Colony, however, made moves to try to absorb Rhode Island, thus placing all those who dissented from their religious views in jeopardy. This was enough to impel Throckmorton and his band to resettle in New Netherland. Throckmorton built his colony on the neck of land thrusting into Long Island Sound and on the area near it. It was part of a large purchase called freeland the Dutch had made from the Indians, or Native Americans, in 1640. Soon the families began building their frame houses and grazing their cattle. However, by 1643, impending hostilities between the Dutch and natives were at its worst, and Throckmorton's colony, caught up in the feud, soon was destroyed as a result. They never returned to the Bronx when they abandoned their land. But we have Bronx now. Now, if you look at the yellow portion of it, that's today's Soundview going up to the Westchester Avenue, east of the Bronx River. Well, in 1646, we had a person named Thomas Cornell, and he received the patent of land from the company's direct general in what is today's Soundview and Classen Point, but which was to be called Cornell's Neck for many years. Cornell had been a member of Throckmorton's settlement in 1642, and he never forgot the area and its agricultural possibilities. He built his frame house, grazed on his cattle on the marsh grass, and planted his crops. Unfortunately, Cornell made the same mistake that Throckmorton did. He did not make any arrangements with the Native Americans for the use of the land. Once again, the natives burned Cornell's house. Cornell escaped to Rhode Island again, but his family kept the Dutch patent to the land after he died in 1655. Nearby to the north, a widow in a similar situation arrived. Anne Hutchinson, a strong-willed Puritan woman with highly independent religious views, had followed the Reverend John Cotton from England to Massachusetts. However, she soon began to interrupt Puritan teachings differently from the clergy. In her view, when the Holy Ghost entered a person, thus remitting all sins, then it did not matter if that person's conduct was good or bad, since he or she was following an inner voice that expressed the divine will. This was the hearsay of antinomianism, for which Hutchinson was tried and sentenced to death. She fled to Rhode Island. When the Massachusetts Puritans attempted to annex Rhode Island, she quickly resettled to New Netherland on the west bank of a river emptying into the Long Island Sound. True to her own teachings, she did not ask permission from anyone to settle there, unfortunately. Her son-in-law began building a house. A band of passing natives gestured that he should leave. When the same thing happened again, He abandoned Anne Hutchinson, who refused to depart despite the confrontation that was brewing. In the summer of 1643, natives descended upon Anne Hutchinson's house. They killed the widow and all who had lived with her, except her youngest daughter, who they carried off to live with them. Since then, the river beside which Anne Hutchinson had settled has been called the Hutchinson River, and the name of Throckmorton's Neck, the land, has been corrupted to Bronx Neck. Another settlement in the Bronx also began in 1646. In the northwest section of the Hudson Shore, a lawyer, native from Breda in the Netherlands named Adrian van der Donck. He obtained a land grant to the area that straddles the current Bronx-Westchester County border from William Keith as a patroon ship, the only patroon ship ever erected on Bronx soil. Van der Donck had been in the colony since 1641, living far up the Hudson River, serving his kinsman, the patroon Killian van Rensselaer. Thus, he knew the natives and their culture well enough to avoid the mistakes made by Throckmorton, Hutchinson, and Cornell. Although the land, called Kaskayek, had been purchased by the Dutch in 1639, Van der Donck brought from the natives in the vicinity the land described in his grant. He also purchased from them additional meadowland. He called his estate Donck. It extended from the Hudson to the Bronx rivers and from Spite and Dival Creek to the Sawmill River. As a young patroon, Van der Donck claimed the title of gentleman and often referred to as the young gentleman or young Kier. Many called this property the young gentleman's land or the young Kier land, which later became corrupted to Yonkers, a name that was applied for many years to the northwest Bronx, as well as to the area still using the name in modern Westchester County. In September of 1655, another general native war broke out. With memories of the last one still fresh in the minds of the settlers, most abandoned the land and fled to the safety of the fort in New Amsterdam. It was about this time, too, that Adrian van der Donck died. Once again, the land remained unused by Europeans. Whatever the inducement, Jonas Bronck made the decision to settle in the New World. Bronck, his wife, Tiuntai Jurians, chartered a ship called the Debrant van Troyten, or Troyen, or Fire of Troy in English. Debrant van Troyen arrived in the East River in June of 1639. On landing, Bronck also hired 2 Dutchmen who have been living in the colony to care for his livestock and also to clear his land. One of them then married a Danish girl, and one of the German indentured servants married soon after. This also increased the number of Bronx dependents. So it basically shows how the Bronx, even in its early time, was pretty much a diverse area, let it be a small little farm in the South Bronx. Under the leadership of Swedish Jonas Bronck, this small group of Dutch, German, and Danish people became the first Europeans to settle north of the Harlem River. Lumber on his land was used to make fence posts, several of which were sold to nearby Harlem by one of the indentured servants for a profit. This is the first business transaction recorded in the Bronx.